Hello dear YouTube community. In this video I show you how to automatically create SAP users in the system. Normally SAP users are created by using transaction SU01. This works quite well with just a few users, but if you want to create many users at the same time, you can use a BAPI. BAPI stands for Business Application Programming Interface. The only thing then is to know how to call this BAPI and to know which data is necessary. The program is divided in these parts. First we declare some variables and structures we need to call the BAPI. Then we set the username. Then we set the logon information, the initial password, then the user data, then we call the BAPI, and last we display some return values. Okay, let's start with the declaration of the variables and structures. First, the LV username is of type uname. Then we need the logon data. I call it ls user logon data of type BAPI logon D. Next, we want to set the initial password. So we write ls user password type BAPI pbd and the user address with information about the name or the email, and this is of type BAPI addr3. And last, the return table for the return values. LT return type table of BAPI red2. Next, we set the username. So I write LV username is user1. Next, the logon information. So we fill the structure we declared above. ls user logon data. Here we can set the valid date from and to. First we set the valid from, and I write here the SU-date, SU-datum. Next, logon data valid to, and I write here 999-1231. And last we set the user type here. And the user type is A. And A stands for dialog user. This is a user who logs into the system with username and password. Next, we set the initial password. ls user password BAPI pvd pwd is U0-123 ASD, or no, let's write ABC. Okay, Next, the user information like first name, last name, and email. Address. You can press here minus and space, then you can see the whole variables you can set here. But now it's works not because I have a typo here, address with two D's, and yes. And now we write here address, first name, and I write here my username in my example. And I do the same with the last name. Normally you use the real first name and last name of the user. Last name. And I write here also the LV username. And last, the email address. This is important to that you can communicate with the user, or that you can set a new initial password and so on. And so I write here my channel email address. It's cust&code@gmail.com. Okay. So we have filled and set the variables and structures, and the next step is to call the BAPI. For this we click on the button pattern and we write here the BAPI name. It's called BAPI user create one. And we see it's a very big interface. You can do a lot of things here. You see the mandatory parameters, and in my example today we only fill the mandatory things. And this is the username, some logon data, the password, and the address information. So we delete the unused ones. The importing parameter generated password, we don't delete this because we need this later, and I see I have deleted the parameter I need again later, so I write it here. It's the parameter generate password, and I set this to true, but for the first example I comment this. So in the first example we need only the username, logon data, password and address, and the table return. Okay, so let's set these parameters with our variables and structures. First we start with the username. I write here LV username, then the logon data structure, ls user logon data, then the password, it's ls user pwd, sorry, and the address, ls user address. And last, the returning table, in our case lt return. Okay, and last we want to display some data. For example, the SAP username. And I write here LV username. Then the password. SAP password. And right here, ls user password BAPI PWD. And last, the return value, because in the return value are error messages, but info messages as well. And so we read here the first line of the internal table, and I only want to display the first line of my internal table because there is the information. So I write here lt return, the first line. So I write here 1 and the message. Okay, so let's press that button, Pretty Printer, and activate the code. Oh, looks good. And now the user with the name user1 should be created in our system if we run the program. So press on execute, and we see here the SAP user user1 with the password 123ABC is created. So we can check this with the transaction SU01. Type here the username user1, and we see here the user exists with the information, first name, last name, and our email address. And yes. So we close this window and we run the program again. So we know what happens when a user already exists. So we get the message user1 already exists. So that is the first example. The second one is we can generate a password here if we don't want to set an initial password in the code. And for this, we can uncomment the parameter generate password. And we can read the generated password and we can write it out. We can display this generated password. And for this, we need another variable. And I call it ls user password out. Type BAPI PWD. And I copy this variable and I paste it to the generated password parameter. And this variable will be filled with my generated password, and I want to display this generated password. So I copy the string and I replace the variable here. Right here, generated. And I pass here the variable ls user password out. So let's pretty print again and activate the code. So let's run the program. But we set another username before. We activate and we run the program, and we see here SAP user user2 is created with a generated password string. Okay, so if you want to create more users, Then you can change the variables like the username or the address data, and you can call the BAPI user create in a loop, for example. The only structures and variables you have to change is the username and the address. Information like logon data should be the same. Okay. And with this program, you can create much SAP users in a short time, and you can use the email address to reach your users so that they can change their initial password and log to the system. Yes. That was this short example how you can use a BAPI call. And if you liked the video, I would be happy if you give me a thumbs up. Feel free to leave me a comment. I always enjoy reading it. If you like my channel, I would appreciate a subscription. I hope to see you again in one of my next videos. Thank you and see you soon.